Returning to one of our top stories, in the US Congress has approved a foreign aid package which could provide billions of dollars in support to American allies. President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed the move, believing it will save thousands of lives. Joining me live is Dr. Malcolm Davies from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. So, yes, the US committed to more military funding, support to Ukraine. Does the Albanese government need to follow this lead, in your opinion?
Absolutely. I mean, the US has taken a very important and bold step here to stand up and essentially support Ukraine with the military aid that it needs in order to hold the line against Russian attacks and then ultimately push back and go into the counteroffensive probably later this year. Without that aid, Ukraine would have been defeated probably by the end of this year. So I think that it's now incumbent on all countries, including Australia, to follow in Washington's lead and actually step up and provide additional aid and military support to Ukraine. And the Albanese government should do that very quickly and very visibly.
The headline from the Albanese government was $50 billion in extra defence spending over the decade. Is this misleading?
I don't think so, in the sense that we are getting $50 billion of extra defence spending through to 2034. But all of that is back-ended right at the end of that decade. There's not much occurring now. And my big concern here is that the period of greatest risk is coming upon us in the second half of this decade. And we are basing an awful lot of assumptions on nothing bad happening this decade so that we can then get a lot of these high-end capabilities in place for the 2030s. So my concern here is that the spending is there, but it's all far off into the future. It needs to be accelerated and brought forward so that we can get capabilities now.
In Mr. Miles's announcement, there's a quote that I'll read out. He says the Indo-Pacific is intimately connected with the success of Ukraine, and threats to freedom of navigation in the Red Sea affects the South China Sea. Is that announcement, do you think, reflected in our national defence strategy?
Look, I think it is. You know, when you look at the national defence strategy, it does prioritise defending sea lanes of communication, and Defence Minister Miles did highlight one of those key sea lanes of communications that runs from Australia northwards into Southeast Asia, particularly to Singapore and Malaysia, and highlighting the fact that a lot of our fuel comes from that area to Australia. So we do have to protect those sea lines of communication. And I think that what you are seeing is an emphasis on naval power that quite correctly is designed to defend sea lanes of communication. But once again, we run into the problem that a lot of these capabilities in terms of the nuclear-powered but conventionally armed submarines and also the new general-purpose frigates won't be really entering service in significant numbers until the 2030s. And so we are left with the potential risk of a capability gap in the latter half of this decade when you might have crises emerge, say, over the Taiwan Straits, that could see our sea lanes communication disrupted much earlier than when we get those capabilities.
Let's talk about Iran. And we're hearing that Iran played down what happened this week regarding what appears to be Israel's retaliatory strike on Iran. Do you think it was downplayed?
I think it was downplayed by both sides because neither side had an interest in escalation at this point. I think that the Israelis struck very effectively using long-range air-launched ballistic missiles against Iranian air bases in the Isfahan region. The Iranians basically said they were drones and have essentially dismissed it as inconsequential. So I think for both sides, there was political benefit in downplaying it, in seeking an off-ramp, because neither side at this time wanted to engage in a tit-for-tat escalation that could lead to a much larger war.
So do you think Iran is likely to escalate at all, or do you think they will continue to support their proxy wars?
Look, it really does depend on what happens in coming weeks and months, particularly as Israel goes into Rafah as part of its war against Hamas in Gaza. If Israel is, for example, operating in Rafah and getting sort of heavily involved there, it's possible that you could see, for example, Iran utilizing its proxies in Iraq and Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon to attack Israel in the north. And then you could see Israel retaliating back. And I think that what we need to understand here is that a precedent has been set where both states' territories have been directly attacked. So if you do see some sort of incident occurring with the proxies, it's possible that then you could see retaliation against the sponsor states' territories. So you could see, for example, a Hezbollah attack in Lebanon leading to an Israeli strike on Iran, or an Iranian attack on Israel using its proxies, generating similar results. So I think that we are in danger here in terms of an escalatory cycle, but it's been essentially delayed for a period of time to see how things emerge.
Dr. Malcolm Davis, always great to see you. Thank you, as always, so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you very much.